in Canada. But I'm not here to mourn proportional representation. I'm here to declare it alive and well. Speaking for Fair Vote Canada supporters, I have to say that our general feeling last February the 1st was one of great disappointment, of anger, of distrust that can only feed the cynicism and disappointment of Canadian voters with their politicians. Our first reaction was to try to get the train back on the rails. We talked to our friends in Parliament, we mounted demonstrations, we sent emails, we sent letters, and we've been dogging Justin Trudeau at every stop ever since, including this afternoon in Edmonton, where he happens to be holding a town hall, and we have one of our strongest chapters there. So we will be there this afternoon. All of these efforts yielded nothing. We got crickets. MPs are evidently on a gag order on this issue, and no one is allowed to stray from the party line. The PM has decided for all of us. As he puts it, it was my decision to make, never mind the will of the people. He is not going to change his mind. So were we naive to think that this government was going to bring in proportional representation? No, we weren't naive. We've been in this business too long to be naive about it. We've had all kinds of false starts in Canada. And the recipe has always been the same. A government wins power with a majority of the seats and a minority of the vote. And strangely enough, they're not so interested in bringing proportional representation. They may have promised to do so, in which case they'll hold a referendum and make sure it doesn't pass, or they'll simply ignore their promises or bring it in at the last minute. There's always some way to derail the change process. So what's new today when I said that proportional representation is alive and well? What's new today is that there are some emerging possibilities, opportunities that are very, very interesting. What we concluded it a long time ago, is that the only way really to get proportional representation is to elect a minority government in which the opposition parties can hold the ruling party's feet to the fire and insist that electoral reform take place. And there are such opportunities today, like the one we have in British Columbia, where the Green Party is supporting a minority NDP government. We're going to have a referendum a year from now. This is probably the best opportunity to get proportional representation in Canada ever, and it's going to take place less than a year from today. Like the opportunity we may well have in Quebec in October 2018, because in Quebec today, all of the opposition parties are supporting proportional representation. They are in dialogue with each other in order to make a common front on proportional representation going into the election and to work together to bring it in if there's a minority government after October 2018. Like we might have in PEI following the next election as well. We all know there was a plebiscite in PEI in November 2016. We know that proportional representation won that plebiscite, 52% for the mixed member proportional PR system versus 42% for first past the post. It's quite possible that we might have a minority government in Prince Edward Island as well. Currently in the polls, the Green Party is rivaling the leading Liberal Party. So that's a major change there. Finally, that is also what we would like to see federally in 2019. We were very disappointed when another false majority government was elected in 2015. Not because we don't like the Liberals. We've got a lot of Liberals amongst our supporters. And we thought that a Liberal government would be very promising. That's not the point. But in terms of getting electoral reform, we knew from experience that the die was cast and that it was going to be very, very difficult. We held out hope for a long time, but in the end, we were betrayed. So what we're hoping for is a minority government in 2019. And what we, Fair Vote Canada, are doing today, we are launching our strategy to try to help elect a minority government in 2019. We have this week launched a pledge drive asking voters across the country to vote for proportional representation in 2019. Exactly what that means in practice will depend on a riding-by-riding basis. We're not going to abandon our friends, but we are going to be supporting trusted friends who have come out in favor of proportional representation in 2019.
Merci Réal et merci à mon collègue Nathan Cullen qui a demandé que je prends la parole pour ajouter quelques mots. C'est vraiment un jour incroyable pour moi. Il y a un an que le Premier ministre Justin Trudeau a brisé sa promesse claire de changer notre système de scrutin de vote. I believed, I was so sure. I didn't think in a million years that the Prime Minister could be on the campaign trail saying 2015 will be the last election held under first past the post. And then to say in the speech from the throne, to make sure every vote counts, 2015 will be the last election held under first past the post. So that when the Special Committee on Electoral Reform was struck, I dropped everything. Now, that's not a small, I'm not saying my personal life matters very much at all, but I believed that what we were doing on that committee, Nathan and me and all of us on that committee, traveling to every province and territory, hearing from thousands of Canadians, people who stood all day, they'd wait for their chance at the mic to speak for 2 minutes. We held open town halls across the country where anyone could get up and speak. And we heard from every single expert in political science on electoral reform, whether in Canada, Europe, we brought them in by video conference. We put together a solid report. I have to say, it's not the first time that a committee of Parliament has studied electoral reform. The first time I discovered as a member of this committee was in 1921 when Parliament concluded that first past the post, our winner-take-all system, riding by riding, was a system that was inappropriate for Canada. 1921. The clock is really ticking on this one. And that in any country that has more than 2 parties, first past the post is a system that denies basic democracy. So when our committee came to a majority conclusion that we needed to move to proportional representation, that was a conclusion supported by the experts we'd heard, by the thousands of Canadians from whom we'd heard. We just didn't know when we went down that road to listen to everyone that the Prime Minister had one system and one system only that he wanted. And even members of his own party didn't support it. In our committee, nobody presented ranked ballot as a good system for Canada. It was not the choice of anyone. We didn't know as we went across the country listening to Canadians, and neither did Canadians know. The Prime Minister had already decided if we didn't pick the system he liked, we weren't going to get anything at all. Well, it's not too late. We need to push for electoral reform in Canada, whether it's a referendum on the ballot, along with all the MP choices people will make in 2019. I personally think it's worth having a question on our national ballot, which, by the way, means rewriting our Referendum Act before 2019. Enfin, je veux dire seulement que ce n'est pas acceptable de briser une promesse si importante comme ça pour un système de scrutin de vote égal et pour une démocratie en bonne santé. Ce n'est pas trop tard. Et maintenant, je vais donner la parole à mon collègue, Nathan Cullen.
Merci, Elizabeth. Merci tout le monde pour être ici. C'est un anniversaire. Normalement, un anniversaire, c'est quelque chose pour célébrer. Mais aujourd'hui, on a un anniversaire un petit triste. After 1 year, I think the story of electoral reform in Canada, particularly under this government, has been both an exercise in the best of politics and the very worst of our politics. The best being members of Parliament working together, engaging with tens of thousands of Canadians, with experts, as Elizabeth talked about, from around the world, around Canada, doing what politics is meant to do, which is to bring forward our very best ideas and then to raise up the voices of Canadians who, despite some experiences in the past, are willing to hope again, that when they go into a ballot box, that is the expression of their hope. And I think many Canadians hoped that Mr. Trudeau, when he made this promise, which I think he repeated something like 1,800 times, that 2015 was the last election under first past the post, that meant something. And I, like Elizabeth and perhaps like Réal, believed him, because I thought there's no way someone can make a promise that often, that clear, so many times and then break it so casually. And I think it was done quite casually in the end. Simply saying it was my decision to make and I chose to make it speaks to the worst of, I think, Mr. Trudeau's aspect. I think, in not to be too personal about it, but that's not a statement becoming of a prime minister who seeks to remove cynicism from the conversation of Canadian politics. Now, today could be a day in which we are only sad, but as Réal has talked about, the sources for optimism around the country are very profound and moving to me personally. As a British Columbian, as Madame May is also, I see a government, first time in our history, where a vote will be held where a government is actually in favor of change. All other referenda have been held under governments that were lukewarm, if not negative. We have a BC government supported by Greens who is looking to push change and evolve Canada's voting system into the last century, never mind this century, of making every vote count. I feel optimistic about what's happening in British Columbia. I'll be dedicating personally a lot of my time. I know Elizabeth will, as well as Fair Vote chapters across British Columbia. Also in Prince Edward Island, where a premier, I think somewhat unfortunately tried to dismiss a referendum that he held, where voters clearly told him they were in favor of change. And to see a Quebec election on the horizon where all of the opposition parties have declared their support for fair voting in Canada. All of these show me that while some in the Prime Minister's office hoped that they could break the promise and then it would simply go away, in fact, the opposite is true. That after that initial grieving and shock that many Canadians felt, we see all these communities that have declared themselves active participants in the 2019 election federally and all of the events leading up to that, willing to put themselves forward one more time. That this is going to be the change that they're going to fight for. This is going to be the change that they are going to see one way or the other. And if we have to drag certain parties and politicians kicking and screaming into the future, we will. But it's so much better when we just simply rely on evidence, rely on good intention, and keep our promises in politics. I just don't think that's so much to ask. So it has been a year. It has been an unsettling year for some of us. I took this failure quite personally, as I think many of us did. But a year since that date, all of these signs of hope right across the country, from activists, from provincial governments, from municipal governments, give me the sense that this is something that is alive and well, and that we will achieve this sense of justice in Canada. Thank you very much. Thank you. Merci à vous.
Thank you very much.
Well, like I said, everybody's upstairs. Like I do. You guys enjoying the beer club? I become patches. It's an enemy. Yeah. Actually, to be kinder than what some have called me.